My name is Eddie Perez. Well, I'm a community organizer here in Hartford's North End. I work for San Juan Center, but I've been working in this neighborhood and in our city for 47 years. My earliest memory of the library was both here in New York. I spent a little time in Brooklyn before I came to Hartford, and my fifth grade teacher in New York said to me, the library is a special place. Make sure you get there on a regular basis. And when I came to Hartford, the first place I looked for was the library because I knew that that was going to be a special place for me. My memory of the library was like a window to the world. I grew up in one of the poorest neighborhoods in Hartford, but the library to me was a way I've always explored. And I did that in New York City. And then when I got to Hartford, even though I thought Hartford was a little way back from the big city, I continued my exploration in the world by going to the library and keeping my eyes on what else was happening beyond my neighborhood and beyond my own household. I was at Little Ashland and Ashland School, and the Hopkins Library was the closest branch. But for some reason, I gravitated to the main library. I didn't think the branch was real. And I thought coming from a big city like New York City, the Hartford main branch on Main Street was a bigger window, I guess is the best way to think it. And I always gravitated there. And it also got me away from my family, from my neighborhood, from the normal stuff. And it was a place to explore. So going downtown and being at the library kind of was a different world from the other end of Main Street. It was three things. It was an escape, but it was a safe place to explore, to think, to be me. And I always had to be like a chameleon and fit in because I was smaller than most kids. I was slower in the sports, but the library was my own space. Nobody else could intrude in my space at the library. And I could find a little corner where I could be me. I was in New York City when Dr. King was assassinated, but that next summer, my uncle came down and picked us up and said, you guys going to come to Connecticut? We're going to take care of you in Connecticut. So I ended up actually a block and a half on Kennedy Street from the library. But Kennedy Street, there was still a lot of unrest and uneasiness because of all of the impact from the riots that happened that summer. And folks expected the riot in 69 and was still thinking about rioting in the summer of 1970. So those two post-summers from the 1968 riots were contained to the north end of Hartford and more specifically to the Clay Arsenal, Clay Hill neighborhood where the library was at. And all those buildings are no longer standing, but the Hopkins Library came back. It was first a culture shock to go from the island of Puerto Rico up in a little hilly town of 3,000 people where everybody lived on the hill. So coming to Hartford was a new experience for me, and it was a little bit calmer than New York City. But because of the poverty, the unrest, the neighborhood actually went through a complete transformation. The summer that I got here was the summer where white flight happened. You know, there was a Stop and Shop here. There were all kinds of shops on Albany Avenue and on Main Street. And that disappeared in a year and a half, maybe 2 years. Everything that was ransacked and affected by the riot disappeared over 2 or 3 years. It became a new neighborhood without all of the amenities that people were accustomed to seeing. And it became a black and brown neighborhood. White folks left, businesses left. And over the last 40 plus years, there's always been this feeling in my part and the people I grew up with that the neighborhood was abandoned, right? And that we had to survive on our own. And, you know, when I started doing neighborhood organizing, the first thing people would do is reminisce about what it was. But nobody could think about what it could become, right? It was that kind of effect that the riots had. The North End continued to become disenfranchised because the investment either never returned. And at the beginning, North Hartford was in transition to begin with, as it was with the effect of the highways and the growth of suburban America. People who wanted to be successful had to move out of their, quote, the ghetto into suburbia. And that was magnified and tripled and quadrupled when the racial unrest Because Hartford was, I want to say small, but the impact was large. It was an impact on everybody. One of the things I learned from one of my teachers, and I think it was late middle school, maybe the eighth grade, when you go to the library, it's a place to explore. It's not just a place to go and take out a book or do one or two things, right? You could do multiple things. And one of the tricks that I was taught in middle school was when you go and you're interested in a book, go 3 books to the left and go 4 books to the right and pull those books out and see what those books have to say about something that you weren't thinking about. So I used to do that. And I would not only go and take the book out that I went to find a reference or do homework with or whatever it was, but I always took one of those 7 books on either side out in order to expand my horizons. So the library was always a place for me to explore. The second thing I remember about the library was that when I was kind of trying to explore something, I could always find an adult staff member who knew more than I knew and who was there to share their wisdom. So it was a place where I could go and find people who were, I want to say, thinkers, talkers, storytellers that would make those books come alive. So I did that in middle school. I did that in high school. I did not go to Trinity as a traditional student. Right after high school, I registered at Hartford Community College at the time, and I decided that college was not for me. And I started my neighborhood work and spent the rest of my career. I went back and as an adult student, I learned how to be an organizer at the library because I became a Vista volunteer and there was no book other than Rules for Radicals to say, how do you do this work in the neighborhood? And I kept going to the library to find things about housing and about equal rights and social movements. All of those things I had learned at Hartford Public High School. I had to learn about what Black folks went through in the South in library books. And like I said, if I had a question about something, somebody in the library would say, you got to go over here or you got to go over there. There was always something different at the library. Somebody was having some kind of program. And I used to enjoy this kind of hanging in the wall, against the wall, watching stuff that I wasn't invited to, but interests me. So the library was a space for me to kind of learn about things that I wouldn't necessarily have learned at school. I definitely wasn't going to get that from my mom. My mom was busy raising my 8 siblings, and she had a 2nd grade education. And I was the first one in my family to think about going to college, first one to graduate. So I had to explore, and then I had to introduce my siblings to the library and to what happens at the library. It was an institution that I think I valued, celebrated, and it kind of gave me a little compass on how to manage my community service in the neighborhood and how to manage some of the resources that my family needed. I didn't evade the street. I ended up being one of the founding members of the Ghetto Brothers, right? I lived in, I think, 17 different buildings, 23 different apartments from when I arrived in 68 to I graduated in 76. All of that movement was in the neighborhood. It was in Clay Arsenal for the most part. There was only 2 other addresses, one in Asylum Hill and one on Park Street. So I was always in the hood, and the hood was in front of me, right? I wasn't going to be able to avoid it. But there were 2 things that influenced. I ended up having to join Sycamore Church in order to play basketball. And I spent a lot of time at the church after that. And then the second thing is that as part of my social action stuff, I got introduced into organizing. And once I learned that, I was able to do that. But I would say that there were many individuals who were the guideposts. And as long as I had a guidepost that said, Eddie, what about that? What about that? I was 21 years old when I bought my first 3-family house. And if I tell you the story, I didn't go and figure out how real estate works, right? I got a flyer and said you could buy a house. And I took the flyer to somebody and somebody did something, and it all worked out. I got a set of keys and I went and opened the door and I got into real estate, right? But the same thing, when I was in the gang and the Ghetto Brothers, it's the equivalent of being part of the yacht club if I had a boat. So when we were growing up, one of the options was if you wanted to be cool and hang out, there were a couple of gangs that already had come up. My first introduction to, quote, a gang was to be part of a dance group. And it was called the Pacifiers, right? And the Pacifiers eventually became the Ghetto Brothers. And the Ghetto Brothers ended up being a street gang, right? Before it became a street gang, it was my social network. It was my social network in the neighborhood. It was my social network at the high school. It was my social network at the church. It was the same group of 50 to 100 kids that made up our neighborhood. And we were the movers and shakers of the neighborhood. A lot of those guys ended up being between the gangs, AIDS, and the violence that happens in our community. I hate to say it, but it's like making the NBA. The statistics are not good. In our neighborhood, a lot of human lives did not make it to 30, didn't make it to 40, and certainly a few of us have made it to 60. The best thing I think I learned from all my mentors and the people whose shoulders I stand on is never forget where you came from. Where you came from is part of you. I came from a tough situation, and in order to survive that tough situation, I had to always think about how do I get out and how do I reach back. It wasn't just getting out. It was, if I get out, it's part of my responsibility to get somebody out. And I've been able to do that in multiple times. And I tell people 47 years ago, I started in March 1978 as a Vista volunteer, your version of Yo Hartford, right? And that experience made me the man, the grandfather, the father, the mayor, all of these things that I've been honored only because I believed in people and people believed in me. So the lesson is believe in yourself, but don't forget where you came from. It's always three pillars: faith, family, and work. And they move together. And the family doesn't have to be your biological siblings. It's the brother and sister that you don't know as well. So work, you have to work to better yourself so that other people understand that you could be a mentor for somebody else. And you can't be complicit in life. You have to be a lifelong learner, a lifelong doer, and a lifelong person that appreciates what's been given to you so that you could give to others. Eva Armstrong taught me something when I was 20 years old, maybe 19 years old. She said, Eddie, smell your flowers while you could smell them. Give them to other people so they could smell them while they're still alive. That was Eva Armstrong's lesson. It's very simple. Que será, será, whatever will be, will be. It's for ours to see. Que será, será. It means that just because something is, it doesn't have to be. And we could make it what we want it to be. That's what it meant to me. You have to have an imagination. If you're coming up in Hartford and you only think about the limits, you will only find the limits. But if you could imagine changing the limits, exceeding those limits, that's what Hartford is. Hartford was founded as the city of opportunity. And the only way you create opportunity, you have to imagine yourself creating an opportunity for yourself and creating opportunity for somebody else. The city of hope. That was what founded Hartford, and that's what's going to continue to grow Hartford. The book that founded my career, Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky. Every child should be able to dream. And part of finding a dream is finding how other people dream. And one of the places to find the history of our people, those who came before us, is to open up the book that has already been written. And you could find it on the shelf, whether it's 3 to the left or 4 to the right. It's on the shelf at the Hartford Public Library. Go find it.
Thank you for listening to 250 Stories, a production of HPL Studios at Hartford Public Library. This episode was written and produced by Christopher T. Brown, sound by Sam Sigmund, edited by Faith Lucas, produced by Leticia Cotto, and with photography and graphic design support from Hartford Public Library's communications team and the Hartford History Center. For more information on this project, visit www.hplstudios.hplct.org. New episodes release every Tuesday, so subscribe to stay tuned.